And we are live.
Coaches. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, they can't hold a flame against you, ay. Blow the whistle, blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, got the game, it ain't no issue, yeah. Blowing the whistle, I had enough with you, the championship, it is gone. Ain't listen to you, I can't give it to you, cause you don't know what I've been on. This is the Coaches Podcast.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back into the Fantasy Coaches Podcast. I am your host, as always, guys, Coach Steve. We have another fantastic episode for you guys on today's show. We are talking prospects, we are talking wide receivers and tight ends, and it's a two-part series here because there's so many wide receivers and so little tight ends. It felt very strange to give one episode and one the other, so we're combining the two tonight's show. So let me introduce my crew for tonight. Coach Tyler, what is going on, brother?
What's up, guys? Let's get into it.
Absolutely. And of course, we have our guest on today's show. John, what is going on, my friend? How you been?
I'm doing great. I think this is my fourth year with you, Coach.
Yeah, every year I reach out.
This has become an annual ritual, 6 o'clock, about 2 weeks before the draft. So it's a pleasure. I'm a teacher, so it's my April vacation. So I'm having a super fun day. No work, and I get to talk draft.
And that's why we're all here. We're talking about these prospects. We got to break these down for you guys so you have a better understanding on, what these players are in a general sense before they land with their team. So we're going to get right into it. News-wise, again, Rishi Rice turned himself in. We'll know more about that when that time comes. Devonta Smith, though, did sign a nice 3-year extension. I love that. Do you guys love that? Do you guys like Devonta Smith? I know we're talking prospects.
I'm a big Devonta Smith guy. He's the perfect number 2. I think he does need the alpha hog next to him, but man, the Slim Reaper is nasty when he's a number 2 receiver.
Yeah, he sure is. I love Devonta Smith. One of my favorite prospects coming out of his class.
And I saw, I think it was Schefter was talking about the Eagles playing proactive right now is really good because you look at that free agent wide receiver market, or at least the guys that are going to be due their contracts, it's headlined by, of course, Justin Jefferson, CD Lamb, all those guys. So jumping ahead of it right now, getting him locked in for $25 million a year. He plays his role extremely well. I think it's, past 2 years over 1,000 yards, 900 yards before that. He plays that role well. Hopefully we see more of a passing attack out of them this upcoming season too.
Yeah, even with Barkley there. But so that was about news-wise. Hopefully we'll hear some more things as the season goes on, obviously. So the off-season goes on. But let's get into these prospects here. That is the fun part of today's show here. And we're going to start here off the top with one of my favorite prospects, Malik Nabers. Last season, Malik Nabers, LSU, wide receiver, 89 receptions, 1,500 receiving yards, and 14 touchdowns. John, since you are our guest on the show, I'll allow you to go first on this one. How do you like Malik Nabers, and how high do you have him up on your rankings and boards?
Well, to say I love him is an understatement. He's my number 1 prospect in the wide receiver class. I wrote about this on Player Profiler, and I've said it now since January on Sirius XM Radio. I got to do some early draft prospect rankings live on the radio. By mid-October, I contemplated that Malik Nabers is the best receiver in the class. I had been watching way too much LSU football. I had Jaden Daniels. I had Malik Nabers. They were scoring points like crazy. Brian Thomas, their defense was a sieve. They were one of the best teams to watch. And I said to myself rhetorically, is Nabers better than Harrison? Sorry, everyone. We have doggies in the house, so I apologize.
Someone disagrees.
So we have so I said, is he better? And I thought, that's got to be crazy. And I kept watching. And by December 1st, I was like, my game tape says that Nabers is better than Harrison. And then I plugged the numbers in about winter vacation. Because when the season ends and we get the bowl games and then we get the decommits, I begin to plug in the final numbers. And I was like, oh, my God. In my model, Malik Nabers breaks the bank and there's things that he does better than Marvin Harrison. So I went back to the tape. I watched more, and what really, and I'm talking the thinnest of margins. Malik Neighbors to me is more versatile. You can line him up on the Z, the X, or in the slot. You could put him in the backfield if you want. I think he's a better yak monster than Harrison. So I have him number one. I mean, I think I know it's easy comp. I think he's Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. I mean, I know it's the same uniform, but watch the film. I don't know what they're doing at LSU, but man, he is just simply unbelievable with the ball in his hands. He's my number one.
I love that. Yeah, they breed elite wide receivers down there in LSU, that's for sure, over the years.
It's unbelievable.
Coach Tyler, how do you feel about Malik Neighbors here? Is he pretty high in your list? He's maybe 1 or 2, 3, whatever.
Yeah, he's sitting at number 2 for me. You just can't get away from the allure of Marvin Harrison Jr. unless you really had time to sit with it and think about it too long. But, I kind of relate them. We'll get into Marvin Harrison next week. But Marvin Harrison coming out to me is the, polished, finished product, right? He's the 6'4" guy. You're going to stick him outside. He can beat you in route running. He can go up above you in those 50-50 balls. But Malik Neighbors, we got Maserati Marv. We got a little bit of Maserati to Malik too, right? He's got that great speed. He's a great overall athlete. He controls his speed very well. In his routes, in just the way that he handles the field. He's not always going 100%, but he's doing that a strategic way. He is someone that I think could be a little bit more polished in his route running. Some of the routes, the way he's rounding them off, it doesn't look as crisp as it could. And that's obviously something that's going to come with time. And I feel like as a guarantee will get better in the league. But he's also a great 50-50 receiver, partially because he makes himself a great 50-50 receiver, right? He's, like I said, he's a great overall athlete. And, you think back to when you were in elementary school or middle school and those kids that were always just, more athletic than you. So they'd sit there and wait for the ball and then they'd jump over you because they could. When you watch the tape, that's sometimes how Malik Neighbors approaches these balls, is he just sits there and waits because he wants to jump over you and prove that he can. So he's a fantastic 50-50 receiver. He doesn't have to be a 50-50 receiver. We know he has that in his arsenal. But I think with some better route running, some better technique as he goes into the league and matures a little bit more, I think that he has that in his bag, but also becomes a little bit more polished. We obviously the stats this year point towards him being amazing. He had obviously a Heisman quarterback, but he was playing alongside a projected first-round pick in Brian Thomas Jr. And we've got, 89 receptions for over 1,500 yards and 14 touchdowns. You get that kind of production anywhere, you're going to be satisfied with it. You get it at the SEC level as a receiver going up against all those corners and safeties, you're going to love it, right? So, luckily in my main dynasty league, I'm in a great position. It's a 1-quarterback league, and I've got picks 1 and 2. So I don't have to make that decision of Marvin versus Malik. I just get both and get to get it. I get both of them. It's awesome. But Malik, there's teams coming from, Schefter and all these NFL insiders. There's teams that have Malik as their wide receiver 1. So looking at not only the dynasty landscape of analysts and people that are moving him up, partially because they have the time to look at the film and kind of go back and forth and flip that, you're not getting a bad receiver if you end up with Malik Neighbors on your team, right? You're getting this explosive guy. He might not be, the most, I keep saying polished. He might not be the most polished guy coming into the league, but he's a firecracker, right? He's going to, he's got the speed. He ran, 4.35 at his pro day. He's got the speed to do it. He's got the athleticism to beat you just about everywhere. But he's a guy that I love. Being the wide receiver 2 in this class is definitely not a dig on him or his talent, because in just about any other class, he's up there as the wide receiver 1. So I have him as my 2. He's arguably a 1B to 1A, depending on how you view it. And obviously, we get into landing spots with some teams. Like if either of them ends up in like New England, then we'll see what happens with them. But he's a wide receiver 2/1B of this class. And he's one of those guys that you are not going to miss on.
I'm actually more concerned if he lands with the Giants, to be honest. But no, Malik Neighbors is the elite wide receiver in this class here. I mean, you should feel really happy if wherever he does land, if you're getting him as the second wide receiver off the board, that you got a steal for the value you're getting him at the whatever spot he falls to, or whatever, 4, 5, 6, wherever he's going to go. You're going to be really happy. He's got literally all the attributes you want in an elite wide receiver. There was very few things that I actually saw as a negative on him. And to me, it really, the worst thing is that he lands with the Giants. That is my worst trait on him, is that he lands in a bad situation, which he unfortunately might. But outside of that, there wasn't really anything. He's got the explosiveness. He's an amazing route runner. I think, tracks the ball well. He's got the yards after catch ability, can produce at any level of the field there. He's going to be an elite wide receiver for any team in the NFL here. And again, you guys kind of said it all really detailed, and I loved it. He is one of the best wide receivers in this class here. Unfortunately, I haven't done my Marvin Harrison film take yet. That's going to be this week while I'm on vacation. And I will tell you next week which one I have, 1 or 2. But at the moment, he's my number 1 guy on the board. So without Marvin Harrison being done. So. All right, over to the next guy here. We have Adonis Mitchell out of Texas here. Last year, where's his stats at? There it is. 55 receptions at Texas, 845 yards, and 11 touchdowns. Tyler, I'm going to let you go first on this one. How do you feel about Mitchell?
Yeah, so, I always talk about being a Big 12 guy. That's most of the ball that I watch, being a Texas Tech fan, Texas Tech grad. So I got to watch a lot of Adonai Mitchell over the past couple of years. He made the move from Georgia over to Texas this past season. And he is, when I say Malik Neighbors is one of those guys that wins the 50-50 balls because he wants to prove that he can. Adonai Mitchell wins on his routes and on the sideline more through his athleticism rather than being a, strategic, amazing route runner, right? He's one of those overly athletic guys, and he plays that role extremely well, right? 55 receptions, 845 yards, 11 touchdowns. We love to see those double-digit touchdown numbers. He is a guy that profiles as, he's going to be one of the ones that stays on the outside, right? He plays the sideline extremely well. He's one of those guys, you watch, we have the difference. One of the things that people talk about for those outside receivers is, are they going to understand and be able to tune their mind to the change from 1 foot down to 2 foot down in the NFL. And you watch his film and you watch his highlights and all the things that he does on the sideline, and he's been getting 2 feet down for a long time, right? He's already got his brain tuned like that. He is a sideline monster. And he is also just one of those athletes, right? You think about the playoff game against Washington where he jumps, it looks like 5 seconds too early for a fade route in the corner of the end zone. And then he ends up just hanging up there in the air until the ball is perfectly in his hands and no one can do anything about it, right? He's an overly athletic guy who's going to play on the outside, but he's not a guy that I absolutely love in terms of, just the immediate tools coming into the league. He is a guy that's profiling as one of those later round 1, early round 2 picks. Obviously, if he gets paired up with someone like Patrick Mahomes, nothing that I say matters because he's going to get the ball directly in his chest every time. It's going to be awesome. But he's a guy that's still maturing. We see some missed games in 2021, 2022. And he's a guy that's just maturing. And sometimes those are the gold mines to get into. And you see that later first round draft capital when you have better teams that like Buffalo that might be looking for a receiver. They've got a quarterback. You've got teams like the Chiefs who might need a receiver, already have that quarterback. He's in a great position to continue maturing, and especially being in the projected spot that he's in, his most likely landing spots are going to boost him up draft boards a ton, right? He is that overly athletic guy, and you walk into a team where you have a good quarterback and some older receivers around you who can teach you how to get into the league. Hey, you got to do this instead of this, help him mature. I think it will be great for him. If he falls into that later second round, he's still a great option to have. It just more depends on landing spot there. But A.D. Mitchell is a guy that, I enjoyed watching. It's one of those, like, how do you stop him type guys? Because, he'll beat you down the field on like a 15-yard comeback route, and then they'll send him on a fade once they get in the red zone, and you just can't beat him to the ball. And his hands are strong enough that you're not going to get the ball out of him. So, I like A.D. Mitchell. He's a guy that has some things to mature on, but also there's not a lot of receivers that you're going to get in any given draft cycle that don't have some things to mature on, right?
Yeah.
And so he's young. He's got the size in a decently sized class, but he's a guy that I like. 4.34 at the combine, kind of overshadowed by his teammate Xavier that we'll get into in a little bit. But I like him a lot. He's sitting around my, 5, my 6 as of right now. He could move up, he could move down, obviously, depending on who's throwing him the ball. But he's a guy that's going to mature. But if you can invest good capital in him, don't reach for it unless he's paired up with one of those Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen guys. But if you're getting him, you're not getting a bad receiver, and he's going to be a guy you're going to love to watch make highlights on Sundays.
I like that. Coach John, how do you feel about Mitchell?
I seem to be in a very rare group of people. I'm not a big Mitchell guy. At current costs in dynasty leagues and looking at his ADP, I'm going to be out on Mitchell. In my model, there's some warning signs that are really concerning to me. I see the ceiling, which Tyler, I think, described greatly. So I see that. Yet, receiving yards per team pass attempt. My benchmark is 2.5. He's got a 1.78. That's bad. Like, he falls way below it. When I'm looking at things like aerial dominator, I'm looking at a 30% for a season high. He had 21%. Why was he never the target hog on any of his teams? Obviously, we understand Georgia had Brock Bowers, but he's a tight end. And then he moves over to Texas. He wasn't the target hog again. 71.8 grade from PFF. It's not the end all. We can all disagree about PFF and their grading system, but I do just use it to see another perspective of what they thought when they watched the player. I get the ceiling. I also watched the games. He disappeared often. Like, I just said, where is he? Like, when you see the great players, they don't disappear for 3 quarters at a time. Sometimes I feel like Mitchell just wanted to score touchdowns and didn't really care about the 10-yard first down catch earlier in the game. But there is, obviously, you don't always know the play call, and you do have the speedster there, on the other side, Worthy. So there is some argument to be made that he was with an all-world wide receiver. But I just think Mitchell, I don't see it. My model doesn't like him. And I think he's going, late first round ADP, early second round ADP right now. So he's number 13 on my list. I'm going to be passing him up unless, obviously, as Tyler said, if he ends up with Patrick Mahomes, everything changes. Obviously, that's a dream scenario. I mean, I'm not blind. You have to say to yourself, oh, my God. But until that, on my analysis, my pre-draft rankings, I'm not a big Adonai Mitchell guy. And I know there's a lot of people like him, so maybe, I'm open-minded to landing spot, and maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't see it.
No, I actually get that. The one thing I did see watching a lot of film was I feel like it was very inconsistent from game to game. It was just like oh, this is great. But then I was like, what did he do in this game? Like, I didn't see anything great in this game, but the games were like, oh, wow, like everything he shows for his upside, it was amazing out there. And I think it will come down to landing spot for him. If he lands in a situation where the offense really isn't that good, I really don't see him taking that level. And when you guys were saying, like, he lands with the Bills, the Chiefs, in situations where their offenses are stronger, there's a chance for him to, I think, really do shine. I think it's landing spot basis for me personally. But again, there were great things about his game.
I mean, let's take it to the absurd. What if he lands with New England in the second round? I mean, that would be like the nightmare scenario, right? Like, you're like, oh my God. Like,
with the rookie quarterback?
Here, right? So,
would be bad.
His range of outcomes is massive right now.
Yeah. Big upside, but just way low floor for me too. I get it. Over to the next guy on the list here, Xavier Leggett, South Carolina. If I had his stats right there, perfect. Well, I'm on my game today. 71 receptions, 1,200 yards, 7 touchdowns. So, John, how do you feel about the South Carolina wide receiver?
I think the NFL loves him much more than the fantasy universe right now. One thing I keep mentioning, they changed the kickoff rules. That is so significant. I think fantasy fans aren't paying attention. Coaching staffs and scouting departments have basically ignored returners for the last 2 years. I mean, I think Mike Clay put it out. The average game has 1 kickoff return. With the new rules in the United Football League / XFL, right? They average 4.4 kick returns. Well, what does that tell me? NFL teams are going to have to find kick returners who are impact players. Look at some of the depth charts out there, folks. It is really bad for returners. Like, there's some teams who literally, like, can you catch the ball? Can you wave your arm and it goes out behind you? Like, literally, like, what is a special teams coach doing right now? Now, I grew up in an age where kick returners are special. Dante Hall, Rick Upchurch. I mean, Brian, not Westbrook, who was the great Eagle returner all those years, punt and kick returner. They used to joke he never took a fair catch. Oh, my God. Returners matter. Why do I say all of this? What's going to happen, the NFL is going to look at the film of Leggett, and he's immediate plug and play, kick and punt returner for your squad. So what does that do? It pushes you way up draft boards. Way up draft boards. There's no question in my mind he's going in the second round. He might sneak into the first. I do not have a first round grade, but I could see a team just loving that special teams contribution. Why is that important? Fantasy fans, playing time leads to opportunity. If you're the kick returner / punt returner, that means you're in uniform. Well, what does that mean? We know the NFL has injuries constantly. So maybe Leggett opens up as the 4th receiver on an offense, and he's returning kicks. We all know that if you return a kick 101 yards for a touchdown, people take notice, coaches take notice. You get on the field in other times, then there's an injury. You get more opportunities. His film is spectacular from last year. Unbelievable. There's SEC. Unbelievable with Spencer Rattler. And I get the narrative. Late breakout. What happened the first 4 years at South Carolina? You know, I'm a teacher. I've learned this when I scout prospects. Sometimes young men mature. Sometimes they get better. And sometimes coaches are wrong in their assessment. And he had an injury. So there are probably a complex group of reasons why the young man didn't get on the field. He also played quarterback in high school. So he wasn't like a polished wide receiver coming into the SEC, and he's playing at the highest level of competition at 18, 19 years of age. So there are some reasons why it took him so long. But I think the NFL is going to love him. My model likes him. It finds him fascinating, and I do understand the concern with the late breakout. But I guess I'm a little old here. You can't coach size and speed. He's 223, and he runs a 4.39. I mean, I'm sorry, folks. You can't coach that. And maybe you design an offense. Remember Demaryius Thomas with those wide receiver screens with Peyton Manning?
Yes.
Maybe his rookie year he gets 30 wide receiver screens, a few dump offs, and you just get the man in space and you let him grow. I think he's a player where you get him 100 touches all purpose. You know, maybe he gets 51 kick returns, 25 punt returns, 35 receptions, 10 carries. Boom. You take that as a flex player, and then you see how he grows. I do like him a lot. He's my number 12 receiver with a second-round grade.
All right, thank you, John. Love that. Coach Tyler, how do you feel about Leggett?
Yeah, I like Leggett a lot. He is a guy that people are going to talk about the late breakout. They're going to say he might be a little bit older. I mean, in a class of, 21, 22-year-old guys, he just turned 23 back in January. So obviously we see the stats. Statistically, he's a later breakout. We don't see over 20 receptions until this year. So there's some good and there's some bad that comes with that, right? We see that he's capable of handling that. And we talked about Spencer Rattler last week. He didn't have a overly star-powered quarterback thrown in, right?
You're very kind, Coach Tyler.
Yeah. No disrespect to Spencer Rattler, but he's not playing with a Jaden Daniels or a Caleb Williams throwing him the ball, right? And so he is going out there and producing. It may be for the first time ever, but he's going out there and producing, right? Over 1,200 yards, 7 touchdowns. He's a very physical player. I will say I did see a big discrepancy just looking at size-wise. He was listed at 6'4" on ESPN and South Carolina's website, measured in at 6'1" at the combine.
Yeah, big difference.
Yeah. Kind of changes how you look at things depending on how you look at how he's measured. But he's still a very physical receiver, right? In the age of these sort of smaller, shiftier guys, we're going to lose out on some physical guys that you can stick outside and run them, right? And that's exactly who Xavier Leggett is. He can work in the intermediate. He can work deep. He can work short. But he's going to beat you. You watch him, you watch his tape, he's going to beat you in 50-50 balls, right? He's not going to be overly explosive coming out of his release off the line, but he's got the speed to do something with it. And, we go back to route running. He's not an insane route runner, but you're not going to beat him to the ball, right? This guy works. This guy grinds it out. And, he's still a very shapeable guy, right? He's not sort of put into a box yet because we've only seen 1 year of what he can be. So teams are going to have the opportunity to take the size and the physicality to maneuver some things as he's growing and maturing in the league. And he's not going to be that player that you stick in a box and say, okay, you're just going to be a downfield threat that we're going to chuck the ball up to, right? He's got the skills to do a lot of things in the field, a lot of ways to game plan him as an offensive coordinator. But it's up to the team that drafts him to invest that time to help grow him and grow an offense with him in it, because he is still a moldable player, right? You can shape him however you want. And also, he has probably the best voice in the league as of right now. So that automatically moves him up my draft board.
I like it. Yeah, he kind of reminds me of how I felt about Rishi Rice last year. I know there was a lot of things I liked about him, but then there were some glaring things I was like, no. But I still really like the player, what I watched on film. That's kind of how I feel about Leggett a little bit there. I like what I was able to watch on film. But again, there's just some things that are the explosiveness, the age, the college production. I know that I don't always like to say college production means everything, but to me, sometimes it does. Like, why are you taking so long to break out in a general sense there? Is it going to be, are you going to need time to adjust to the NFL level in that sense as well? Like, there's little things like that, but I like what I was able to watch on film with him, and I'm intrigued where he lands. I think landing spot will really decide my love or hate for him overall. And again, if he lands in like a good landing spot, like we just talked about Mitchell, he might be someone that I do like moving forward. But again, I'm kind of torn on him as a prospect overall. Over the next guy here, Xavier Worthy out of Texas here. Xavier Worthy this past season here, 75 receptions, 1,000 yards, and 5 touchdowns at Texas here. Coach Tyler, go through why you like or dislike Xavier Worthy.
Yeah. So as repeat listeners know, I'm a Texans fan, right? And being a Houston guy and being a Texans fan, I had a lot of love for Tank Dell going into the draft. And he was one of those guys. I didn't want to reach on him, but I wanted the Texans to go, keep him in the H. That's what he wanted, right? It's what all the fans wanted, and it's what we got. And the big thing that everyone talked about with Tank Dell was the size, right? We don't want to be sizeists, but sometimes, you're playing the sport with grown men throwing themselves at you full speed. Sometimes having a little size works, right? Worthy measured in the combine at 5'11", 165, right? That's not attractive to people scouting him in terms of, how many times is this guy going to be able to take a hit from a safety if we're running him on a screen, right? We obviously do have the record-breaking 40, 4.21, so he's got insane speed, literally. But he's someone that I can never really get a pulse on, right? He's a guy that I'd watch one game, and he's this insane deep threat, and he's just blowing by everyone, and you can't get to him. You can't get around him. He was the epitome of speed kills. And then you watch the very next game, and, he's dropping the ball. He's just these concentration drops. He's not doing everything right. He kind of seems out of it. And you just have this back and forth of no one can stop this guy. And then, someone can stop him. It's himself. He's had drop problems in the past. 2 years ago or 2 seasons ago was the big year. He had 10.6% drop percentage. Not ideal at all. You don't want any receiver dropping a tenth of their passes. This year, he got it down. It's still not great at 6.3%, but he is one of those guys that, he can be a great deep threat, and he can be sort of a shorter underneath guy. We didn't see a ton of work from him in the intermediate in college just because of partially how Texas runs their offense and then partially because of how they just utilized Worthy as a whole. But kind of like John talked about, you're not only getting this blazing fast receiver, you're also getting a great return man, right? He was Texas's main returner through most of his time in college. We see 15 punt returns 2 years ago, 23 this past year. He didn't do a ton on kickoffs just because, no one fields kickoffs in college anymore. So we've got the ability as a returner. We know what he is as a receiver in that speed threat, and he is a good athlete. There's just some things that we could see more of. You hate to see those drops as a receiver coming into the league because that's not something that anyone else is stopping you from doing, right? That's the ball hitting your hands and you letting it fall out. And I would like to see a little bit more work in that intermediate. Obviously, we saw how someone not as heavy with someone like Tank Dell, right? He was used a little bit in the intermediate, but he was burning guys deep, and they were getting him on those short little routes and just letting that yak ability speak. Right. And that's exactly where I think Xavier Worthy is going to make his money, not just because they have similar sizes, but because that's exactly what he did in college and that's who he profiles as. But, this guy is an accolades monster, playing in the Big 12, playing for Texas. He's getting all Big 12, all conference honors, all everything like that. He's getting recognized nationally. But he's just a guy that he's got to work or he's got to walk into the right building to be utilized properly. Or else a coach is just going to try and throw him out in the slot and say, hey, go figure it out. And so, Worthy's a guy that I like at the right price. Obviously, like we talk about with most guys outside of like the top 2 or 3 in terms of receivers this year, a lot of it's going to depend on landing spot just because that means a lot to what system they're walking into and who's throwing them the ball. But Worthy's landing spot is going to tell me a lot of how I feel about him going into rookie drafts. Because we've seen some of the tools, we've seen some things he can get better at. Now, is he going to walk into an offense that is going to utilize him, or is he going to walk into an offense that sees the 5'11", 165 and says like, hey, you're just our slot guy, go run some shallow routes?
That's fair. I like it. John, how do you feel about Worthy? Is he worthy enough for you?
Well, Coach Tyler, if someone drafts Worthy and puts him in the slot to run shallow routes, that is malfeasance as a coach. I mean, you clearly are not scouting. You can put him in the slot, but he can attack you vertically, and you'd be wise to use him as a vertical downfield threat. So let's go back to what my first scouting report says. 2 concerns that you have to think about immediately, and Tyler mentioned both. 1, he has some sloppy hands. I mean, if you watch Texas football this year, I can't count the number of times in the last 3 that he dropped a huge pass. So sometimes I think what it must have been like to be Coach Shark or Quinn Ewers and be like, oh my God, I called the right play. We schemed that play. We got everything there. They got the blocking. Ewers saw it. You were wide open, and he just drops it. So the hands have got to improve at the NFL level, and that's a whole debatable kind of, can you improve handwork? But if you get over that, he's open a lot. His separation is unbelievable. 2, he's 165. 10 years ago in the NFL, they wouldn't even consider him. But now that we saw with Tank Dell and to a lesser extent players like Jordan Addison, it's not the end-all and be-all that 165 used to be. I don't think he's an X. I think at the pros, he is going to be a Z or he's going to be an inside guy. Move him, put him in motion. Could you play him on the X a few snaps? Sure, of course. If you want to get a mismatch or something like that, maybe you could do that. He has the one thing that NFL coaches drool over. That is speed, 4.21. And here's what's interesting. Don't double count speed in your grade. If you watch the film, we know that he had speed. I mean, there's no question. Tyler mentioned it. You saw it. That man gets open deep over the top. It's sometimes incredible. Like he just destroys cornerbacks, safeties, the deep field. He returns punts. If you're looking for a return specialist, he could change your whole team around. And maybe he's your second or third receiver early in his career. I do think we mentioned Devonta Smith earlier. I think Xavier Worthy needs to fall into a similar type of situation. Just an example, maybe with an Amari Cooper, maybe with the George Pickens in Dallas, maybe with the CD Lamb or George Pickens in Pittsburgh, CD Lamb in Dallas. He needs to have, I believe, the alpha receiver who gains the attention, who's the target hog, and then you use Worthy as just this one-on-one monster who can just be, if you got 3 seconds with your quarterback, Worthy can beat the secondary deep. I've moved him up into 6th in my rankings. He's my first-round grade. I wonder if, maybe his ceiling is Devonta Smith. I don't think he can be What did we see out of CeeDee Lamb? 1,700 yards. What was a ridiculous 130 receptions?
Yeah.
I don't think his body could withstand that type of physical pounding. But could he be 1,100 yards, 8 touchdowns, 65 receptions? Yes. So I like him a lot.
Yeah, I like Worthy a lot as well. I feel like a team needs to really motivate him on the field there. I feel like when I was watching him at times, he feel it kind of was just like the effort he put on the field sometimes just wasn't there. And whether or not, he didn't have to do too much or they're scheming him to, hey, you just take your time. And, when you're ready to go deep, we're going to make you go deep. So, there was definitely times when I saw that on the field there, but he's got the speed. Like the one trait I really loved was watching him just take a short route and get 15 yards because he can easily just explode past the defender. And again, I think any NFL team is going to love him. Now, is he ever going to be a true wide receiver 1 for a team? I don't know about that, but I think he's going to be a really, really elite number 2 wide receiver for any football team here. And he's got the upside, the speed. We all love that. He's got everything in terms of big playability that you want in a wide receiver here. And again, if he can just stay on the field and hopefully that his size isn't going to bring his downfall towards him and that frame, he has a real good chance of making it really far as a wide receiver in the NFL. All right, over to the next guy here, Ricky Purcell from Florida. I just had his things up here. If I could find it.
I got it.
You have it? You have it then.
Yeah. All right, 65 receptions, 965 yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 touchdowns rushing. 2 touchdowns rushing.
I like that. So, John, how do you feel about Purcell?
One of the largest risers through this draft process for me. Ironically, I watched too much Florida football because I'm a big Trevor Etienne guy, and I was fascinated by how is Graham Mertz going to transition to the SEC from the Big Ten, and after he kind of disappointed at Wisconsin. And as I'm watching Florida more and more, I'm like, who's this Ricky Pearsall guy? Like, he just kept jumping out on tape, in games. So I looked up, he's from Arizona State. He ended up being honorable mention Pac-12, his last year at Arizona State. He transfers for the last 2 years to Florida, and he's been really good. 6'1", 193. I think you could argue he has the best hands in the class. He's at least in the conversation. I wonder if he's just a slot receiver. And there's nothing wrong with being a big slot receiver, like kind of in the Tyler Boyd mode. I don't think he's an X. I think he's a Z and an inside guy, but you can flex him out there at the combine. Because I'm just healthy skeptic on athleticism on any player. Coaches lie, high school tape lies, competition lies. But when he went to the combine, you ran a 4.41. Oh, that was nice. But these two show acceleration and burst. The 4.05 in the 20-yard shuttle and the 6.64 in the 3-cone drill, that was it. I like the production. I like the tape. I love the hands. I like the size. He's athletic. I'm all in. He's my number 10. I would not be surprised if he goes in the first round, but I do have a second round grade because it took me. He's not one of those early breakout guys. And my only concern is I think he might land in that early second round to a bad team. That could be what, does he make it to a playoff team in the first round or does he land early second round? But I like Pearsall.
Yeah, I think Mel Kiper had him at like pick 38 to go into the Titans. So that would be a horrible pick there. Coach Tyler, real quick, how do you feel about Purcell?
Yeah, Pearsall, he is a guy, kind of like John said, he's a slot guy to me, and that's not a dig at him at all. No. Right? He attacks the zone extremely well. The more I talk about receivers, the more you figure out how much I love good route runners. Ricky Pearsall is a great route runner, right? And, he has the 4.41 speed. He's not an Xavier Worthy at, 4.21. but he's got good enough speed. And he's one of those guys that you just watch him play. He didn't have the most accurate quarterbacks over the last couple of years, but you watch him play, and it's one of those, how is this guy always open, right? Because he's not necessarily faster than you. He's not necessarily more athletic than some of the DBs he's going up against, but he just understands how to get open. And in that, paired with his great hands, like John talked about, that's an excellent weapon to have, right? He might be one of those bigger slot guys, and that's honestly the perfect place to put him, right? Just say, hey, go attack this safety, go attack this linebacker if you somehow get a linebacker on you, right? Just go attack, find an open zone, and go make a play, right? One of the bigger digs on him was that he did face zone a lot, but who cares, right? We know what he can do and win. And if teams are just going to focus on beating him man-to-man, then if he ends up with one of those playoff teams who can throw the ball, he's going to find a way to get open at some point in the game and make him pay. But also he's going to open everything else up for the offense, right? So it's going to make teams commit as a whole. Are they going to play zone to stop Pearsall? Are they going to play man to stop Pearsall? Are they going to play zone to stop whoever else? And from there, the game opens up for someone, right? And you just hope that he's playing with a weapon that's a little bit more dangerous than him, so they focus on beating them with zone, right? And he can eat. So Pearsall's a guy I really like. What's up?
No, I think when you said slot is no longer a pejorative term. 10 years ago, a slot said you weren't really a starter in the NFL. But nowadays, slot, so many 3-receiver formations, right? 13 personnel. And the NFL plays a lot of zone coverage. Wasn't some ridiculous, like over 70% of zone coverage last year by NFL defenses? So you need this type of player who can beat the zone underneath to open it up down the field for your other wide receivers. So I think his skill set fits in the modern NFL.
I like it. All right, let's get over to the next wide receiver here. Romo Wilson from Michigan. I have his stats pulled up. I don't have his stats pulled up. Oh, I got it. He went to Michigan last season, 48 receptions, 789 yards, and 12 touchdowns. Coach Tyler, how do you feel about Wilson?
Yeah, I like Roman Wilson. He's a guy that, as I've been obviously, Texans homer, been watching my Texans media. He's a guy that's spoken very highly of the Texans and met with them at the combine. So obviously you keep an eye on that. This was all pre-Stephon Diggs trade, so it can kind of be taken with a grain of salt. But he was a big catalyst for that Michigan offense, right? We talked with running backs a couple weeks ago. We talked with J.J. McCarthy last week. Michigan was a run-first team. And that obviously worked to their advantage, getting them national championships, right? Getting all the trophies that they wanted. But Wilson, if McCarthy had to throw the ball, he was that guy, right? He's a little bit undersized, as we see, measured in at 5'11", 185 at the combine. And he's not the fastest, ran a 4.39. We don't love it, but he plays a lot faster than he tested, right? He's able to push DBs back on their heels and really expand the field. He's a guy that has yak ability, and he understands how to play zones well. He's one of those guys that we saw go off on the sidelines. He was a big comeback route, big out route guy for McCarthy, right? And he's someone that understands how to play those defenses well. And like we talked about with McCarthy, he's in a pro-style offense, right? He knows what the offense is going to look like and what most offenses that he would walk into are expecting of him when he comes in. And you see that both because of the style of offense and the coaching that he was under with now NFL head coach with the Chargers, Harbaugh, right? There's some things that he could learn in terms of, how he's running these routes, a little bit better on his breaks, a little bit better on kind of like we talked about with Malik Neighbors, that speed manipulation, getting guys back and forth. but he's a guy that I like watching. He's a guy that has the ability to go be, again, like we talked about, he's got the ability to go be a slot guy, but he played outside at Michigan. He can go make plays if you need him to. And I think that coming from that Harbaugh system, it has matured him and prepared him to come into the NFL in the expectation area. And he also understands how the offense is going to run, as opposed to some guys coming in from those, college style air raid type offenses.
I like it. John, how do you feel about Wilson?
When I broke down the tape, it is interesting because you have to understand Michigan is a low volume passing game, and they ran the ball down your throat. Well, why is that significant? One, Roman Wilson isn't going to have the counting stats that wide receivers at LSU or Alabama previously, like within the last couple of years, Ohio State has. So you've got to understand the context in which he played in. Two, you need to understand his efficiency and how good he was on third down. Because Michigan asked him and J.J. McCarthy countless times in 3rd and 7, 3rd and 10 to get the first down. I mean, it seemed like anecdotally, every time they needed a 3rd and 10, it was Roman Wilson that was getting that pass from J.J. McCarthy. Roman Wilson, I do think he's more of an inside receiver, but he can play on the outside occasionally. So he's very versatile. He's bigger than you think. He's 186. I did not expect him to be 186. I mean, it would have been nicer if he was 190, sure, but 186, real nice. What I like about him, he's tough as nails. I cannot tell you the number of massive, big-time hits. Roman Wilson will go in front of the safety in the red zone, 2 yards into the end zone, and he'll take a lick. I mean, he will take a lick. He's faster than you think at 4.39. And one thing that really stuck out to me, I don't think of him as a home run hitter, but this is mind-blowing. If you look at him compared to Xavier Worthy averaged 14 yards per reception over his career. Roman Wilson averaged 16. You look at ADOT. Xavier Worthy averaged 10.3. Roman Wilson averaged 14.8. Very quietly, Roman Wilson is a home run hitter, and he can attack the safeties over the top vertically from the slot position. I have a second round grade. I do think he's kind of like in that, my teammate on the rookie big board always says it, 50 to 100 range. After the first 50 players are off the board, he'll probably be one of those receivers that some team really likes. It's interesting. What if the Chiefs go offensive line in the first round or defensive line, and then they grab a Roman Wilson in the second round? I mean, that is the type of thing that could happen. He's a very interesting player. Can't wait to see where he lands.
All right. I like you guys. Great analysis on that. On to the next guy here. Jalen McMillan out of Washington here. Last season, 45 receptions, 559 yards, and 5 touchdowns. The year before, he did have over 1,000 yards in 2022. John, how do you feel about McMillan?
It's interesting. I just recorded a sleeper episode last night, and one of the players that we broke down, Matt and I, were Jalen McMillan. I believe he has fallen under the radar because obviously Rome Odunze is so good, right? Everyone loves him. You have Michael Penix, who is now getting into that early first-round conversation, right, to the Raiders or maybe, who knows, maybe to Minnesota. And somehow Jalen McMillan has gone under the radar. But you need to watch tape from 2022 and 2023. He had a pretty serious injury this year. I think he missed 6 games. He missed a nice chunk of the season.
He did.
He's 6'1", 197, so he has really nice NFL size. I don't think he has as good of hands as Ricky Pearsall, but he's not bad. But I do think he lined up in the slot like 90% of the time for the Huskies. Now, part of it is Rome Odunze sitting there, your classic X receiver. Why are you going to put McMillan at the X when you got Rome Odunze, an all-time great in college? So I can't say that he can't line up outside, but his experience is from the slot. He ran a 4.47 at 197, but it's the agility and the burst that's more impressive. A 4.18, 6.94 are really, really nice numbers. Watch the film from 2022 and watch the film from 2023. The film in 2022 is better. He's healthier. He basically was in the same bucket as Rome Odunze after the 2022 season. Now, with his injury, Odunze just skyrocketed. And I'm not taking anything away. Odunze's a great prospect. But Jalen McMillan, to me, is one of the value plays in drafts. I've seen him go in the 5th round of a dynasty draft. I will take him all day at the 5th round, barring an awful landing spot. But if he's in a decent spot, I like Jalen McMillan a ton.
I like that there, John. I too am a very big fan of McMillan's game when I was watching his film. Coach Tyler, how do you feel about McMillan?
Yeah, McMillan, it seems like we're just getting all the slot guys out of the way right now. But yeah, bigger slot guy. Just like John said, he's dealt with injury this past season. Go watch 2022, just under, 2 yards shy of 1,100 in 9 touchdowns in this offense. One thing that did sort of happen with McMillan's injury was the emergence of Jalen Polk. So now you kind of have to value the 3 receivers in terms of, who was really the guy because they're the guy and who was the guy because of how prolific this offense was in terms of passing. McMillan is a guy, he's a player that has a tendency to get a little bit bullied. I feel like, he is agile. He is able to beat guys in the open field. But when he did face some more physical secondary players, he was able to get knocked off his routes a little bit more. He wasn't having too much fun with, those contested catches. But he is still a guy that we've seen success out of. He's a player that has the ability to stretch the field a little bit. And, he is going to fall because of the hype of everyone else from Washington in the draft and just how deep this receiver class is. But like John said, if he ends up in not the worst possible landing spot, like this guy is going to be a steal for you, right? When you're getting him in the 5th round, you're taking dart throws at just about anyone that you'd be picking there. Why not take a dart throw at a guy that has had success at the Power 5 level, who is shown that he can be that guy and who, fits into the bucket of a slot receiver, plays that role very well, and teams are going to take him understanding that.
Yes.
So, I like him. I like him at cost right now. Like I like him at the value that he's falling at a lot. We'll see what moves the needle with, draft capital and landing spot, but he is a guy that's produced, and he was just part of, one of the greatest passing offenses in college football. So why not take that dart throw on him?
Definitely take the dart throw on him. You absolutely should. All right, over to the next guy. This was per request of John Jerron Baker, UCF, wide receiver here this past season, 52 receptions, 1,100 yards, and 7 touchdowns. John, since you were very strongly about adding this guy to our docket, talk about Baker for us.
I'm glad you asked, because I'm just like a silly kid going to the prom for the first time as a sophomore. I just really, really like Javon Baker. I like him so much. He's my number 7 prospect in this class. I am just silly bullish. I don't understand why he's not getting enough national media attention. I've seen him ranked as low as outside the top 20, and I'm shocked.
Wow.
I understand. Maybe you don't think he's a top 10. I get it. Maybe you don't think he's a top 12. But to have him outside the top 23, I'm just like, I question if you even watched any tape. The good. He is a bully on the field. He's a classic X receiver. He's a boundary receiver. He wins one-on-one matchups. He can beat you deep. He can beat you short. He can beat you on the slant. He is a well-rounded player. He's a bully with his hands. He has vice grips with the ball. He's a contortionist. My friends, name the UCF quarterback. If you're not a fan of college football, look at Tyler. Oh, he knows. Who is it, Tyler? What's his name?
John Reese Plumlee.
May I ask you a question, too? Is John Reese Plumlee considered an accurate quarterback by any stretch of the imagination?
Not really, but he's a heck of a baseball player.
Oh, he's one heck of, and he's a great college quarterback. There's a difference. There is literally on tape, Javon Baker, horizontal, 3 feet off the ground, with his arms stretched out as far as they can, catching the ball from John Reese Plumlee. There is tape of Javon Baker skying, jumping as high as you can with his hands 4 feet above his head, trying to catch the ball from John Reese Plumlee. The tape's amazing. He has I like the alpha dog attitude. Zay Flowers, Chad Johnson, Terrell Owens. I got no problem with it. I want someone mentally tough who wants the football, demands the football. Hey, defensive players hate him. Teammates love him. I'm fine with that. He's going to be chirping all game long. I'm fine with that when he's on my team. Now, here's the trifecta of goodness. 3 stats, and there's no one stat. So I like to use my model that there's no one perfect stat. When you're looking at a player holistically, you want data points and watch the film. But this trifecta blows my mind away from an analytical point. His yards per reception over his career, 17.5. That's insanity. He had over 23, I think, this year. I mean, they basically, UCF said, Javon, just run deep. John Reese Plumlee, please get the ball within a radius of this young man, and he'll catch it. 2, his ADOT is 17.1. Do you know how rare it is to get ADOT and yards per reception to match that high? Sometimes you get players with high yards per reception, low ADOT because they are yak monsters. Sometimes you get players with a massive ADOT, but their yards per reception are low because the quarterback didn't connect or the pass was dropped or something happened. So I have ADOT and yards per reception over 17. That's outstanding. 3rd one, the trifecta. Receiving yards per team pass attempt. My benchmark is 2.5. Marvin Harrison had a 3.22. Just to give you an idea. Javon Baker had 3.11. Let me repeat that. Javon Baker, receiving yards per team pass attempt, 3.11. That is a very sticky stat. If you're above 2.5, you probably got a good fantasy career. If you're above 3, you are really in some rarefied air. And we talked about Malik Neighbors earlier. You want to hear a stat that's crazy? Malik Neighbors is 4.2. Oh, but that's because of the yak yards. But that's insanity when you get a 4.2. So Javon Baker's my guy. If he's in the 3rd round, I'm going to have 100% in my dynasty leagues. I'm going to scoff him up every time. You don't have to pay a second-round pick. Now, if I watch ADP and he moves up, then I'll have to pay attention. But right now, I'm going to be all in every draft. I've gotten Javon Baker. I think he's a star. He's an X receiver. He's a boundary receiver, and people aren't paying attention.
I like it, John. That was a great analysis there. I think you basically covered everything about Baker, and I absolutely love it. So it's gonna make us move on here because we are running down on time. So, Coach Tyler, you get the honors of starting us off with our tight ends, the 3 tight ends, real quick. Brock Bowers out of Georgia last season. He had 56 receptions, 714 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Talk about Brock Bowers. Is he the confirmed number 1 tight end in this class?
Man, you want to talk about a softball of a guy to talk about. He is confirmed number 1 tight end, no question about it. He is the new prototype of what tight ends are, right? He's an adequate blocker. I'm not going to take a ton away from him on that. He's not a star. But in the passing attack that Georgia had, which is almost similar to Michigan's in that it's not a ton, Brock Bowers led his team all 3 years in receiving. And Georgia's no slouch in terms of the receivers that they're getting and the people that they can put on the field, right? This guy was just so dominant that he had to lead the team, right? Even in injury, he still led the team in receiving yards, right? We saw him dealing with a little bit of injury this past season. He's still kind of going through some stuff that's held him out of combines and pro days. But, when you have the allure that Brock Bowers has, and you're talking about tight ends, one of the big things for tight ends, if they're not going to be a top 10 pick like a Kyle Pitts or Brock Bowers now, you worry about, how can they get on the field? And players get on the field because they're great at pass blocking, right? Or run blocking or blocking in general. And the great thing about those top 10 picks at tight end is no one gets fancy points for the blocks that they make. And that him coming in, no team's going to be like, hey, we're just going to run stretch the whole time. And you're going to wrap around and block whoever's coming in, right? You know what you're getting out of him. And you know that whatever team takes him is not just going to stick him down there to block, right? He can do it if he needs to on certain plays, but he's going to go out and he's going to go catch the ball. He has great yak ability. You look at his stats too. We're talking about, a 6'3", 6'4" tight end, depending on where you find your measurements. Let's see, combine 6'3", 243. And we see 5 rushing touchdowns over the past 3 years. Tight ends don't run the ball. But yet Brock Bowers was athletic enough and versatile enough to run the ball, right? In 2022, there's a little bit of trickery going with this. We see 9 rushes for 109 yards. In 2021, we see 4 carries for 56 yards, right? No one really expects him to get the ball on these sweeps and stuff that he's going on. But he's still athletic enough to go average, double-digit yards per carry. If you want an athlete catching the ball, if you want basically a big receiver going out there that you can line up in your tight end spot, Brock Bowers is the guy, right? And we've seen, him mocked to a bunch of different places. I've seen him mocked as early as 5 with the Chargers. We know that Jim Harbaugh can really utilize a tight end. And I've seen him mocked most often about number 10 with the Jets. Aaron Rodgers is going to be capable of supporting him fantasy-wise if he can stay on the field. But Brock Bowers is, he's that home run tight end that everyone's been looking at since he was a freshman and broke out. And he's been a home run ever since. All right. So he's a guy, if you're sitting there, I'm still between him and Rome for that 3rd overall skill position. I just keep flip-flopping back and forth on them the more I watch each other. But if you're taking him as the 3rd or 4th skill position guy, you're getting a home run pick. You're getting another receiver to throw in your tight end spot.
I like it. John, how do you feel about Brock Bowers?
Oh, he's easily the number 1 tight end in this class. he's within a small pantheon of the last 11 years as a top-level elite prospect at the position. Coach Tyler is right. He's more of your modern-day tight end. He's a little bit undersized in the butt at 240, so I do think, but he can block well at Georgia, so I'm not too worried about that. I think he's a move tight end. He can use his body and leverage, and he can use angles to block, so I'm not worried about that. He'll stay on the field because most NFL coaches want their tight ends to block. But as far as an actual athlete and receiver, he's off the charts for a tight end. Let's just hope we don't get a Kyle Pitts situation with an awful coach and just a bad offensive scheme. I mean, he's every bit the prospect. It's an interesting argument. Who was a better prospect, Kyle Pitts or Brock Bowers? It's definitely a debate worth having. But unfortunately, Kyle Pitts has not hit his ceiling at the NFL level. But we're going to see if that changes this year with Pitts. He's still very young, and he does have a 1,000-yard receiving season underneath on his resume already. So Bowers is great. I don't know if he's a top 10 pick, but those are the rumors. I hope he goes a little later in the draft to a better team, but we'll see what happens with him. I'd love this. I think he's off the board at the latest by pick 20, but I hope he falls a little bit and ends up with a better quarterback and a better team.
I like it. All right, over to the next tight end here, Cade Stover from Ohio State. This past season, I just had it up. There it is. 41 receptions, 576 yards, and 5 touchdowns. A lot of that was career high. John, I'm going to let you take Stover here. How do you feel about Stover?
The NFL is going to love him. They love this type of player, 6'4", 247, coming out of an elite program. He can block, he can catch, he can help you both ways on offense. He's a 3-down tight end. He played, if you don't know, he played defensive line for 2 years at Ohio State before he converted to the offensive side of the football. So if you're looking at volume stats, only 82 career receptions, that's actually pretty good for a tight end, but surprisingly good. But he's not going to have those unbelievable numbers that because he didn't play a lot of tight end. Also, if you haven't noticed, Ohio State's kind of loaded at the wide receiver position for every season that Cade Stover was on campus. So he's not going to be a massive target hog, but the athleticism is there. He can play both sides. He can play all 3 downs for you. I have a 3rd round grade. I think that's where he'll go in the draft. The question is, what is his ceiling? I think he's a nice fantasy player. I don't think he'll ever be that difference-making tight end, 70 catches for 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. But if you need in our dynasty leagues where you have large rosters and you need depth, I think he's that type of depth player.
Yeah, I like Stover a lot. He's my tight end 2 right now in the class. I like him. I like the versatility and like the blocking and receiving ability that he does offer there. And Coach Ty, we're going to the last one here because I know this was your guy here. You've been talking about Ben Sinnott from Kansas State for quite a while here now over our podcast now. So I'm going to let you start with this one here. Tell us about Ben.
Yeah, so Ben Sinnott, Big 12 ball. That's what I watch. That's what I'm good at. Sinnott is one of the faster risers as a tight end. Going into bowl season and then early draft process this year, the almost understanding was you're going to have Brock Bowers 1 and then Jatavian Sanders 2, right? Those are going to be your 2 fantasy tight ends. Those are going to be the top 2 tight ends taken in the draft. And as combines have happened and interviews and pro days, we've slowly seen Sinnott working more and more up the board, right? He's got that good size, like we talked about with Cade Stover, right? 6'4", just around 250. I think right at 250, if I remember it right. So he's got the size of a tight end. He's one of those players that you watch, kind of like we talked about with Ricky Pearsall, right? He plays quicker than he tests fast. All right, so we look at his 40-yard dash from the combine. We see a 4.68. Good for a tight end, right? But you watch him play, and he's able to move. He's very athletic. He can be very physical, he lacks a little bit of physicality in the blocking sense. But again, we're not getting fancy points for blocking. And if we're getting, I've seen mocks where people are, reaching and taking him in round 2. I've seen him a lot just sitting in that round 3 area where, we're waiting to see where he's going to be. And we kind of get that antsiness of, is it going to be good? Is it going to be bad? We don't know exactly where he's going. But he's a guy that can mature. He needs to mature a little bit, but he's also just this big ballerina, right? He's a guy that is going to make plays when he needs to. We see, 676 and 6 touchdowns this past year on 49 receptions. He's getting good average yard per reception, right? We see, 2 years ago was really his first opportunities. We see 31 receptions, 14.4 yards per reception this past season on 49 receptions, 13.8, right? He can go make the plays. He can get downfield. He obviously works better against man coverage because, like I said, he plays quicker than he plays fast. He's able to just kind of outmaneuver whoever's really thrown on him. But he's a guy that has really risen up my board. He's a guy that I like to watch. I could see him get a little bit more physical in terms of overall play style, but he's also got the size to where if he's got to push forward and run you over, he's going to do it at 6'4", 250. So, he's got pretty decent hands. He's not a guy that I think is going to be a game buster like Brock Bowers, but he's a guy that I could see developing into a fairly good tight end. I could see him falling into that top 12 range easily through the correct development. And obviously, we want him to go into the right system who will actually utilize him. But he's a guy that's going to get on the field. He's a guy that's going to be able to play. And he has the size to go be dominant if he just develops a couple little things in his game.
All right. So that was all the hype that you've been mentioning for a while. I like it there, Coach Tyler. John, how do you feel about Sanat?
I like him so much. He's my number 2 tight end. I couldn't agree with Tyler anymore. He's very athletic, much more than he's given credit for. And, Coach Tyler, I've watched a lot of Big 12 because it's great for college fantasy football. Now, the defenses are actually getting a little better over the last couple of years than they were, about 8 years ago, but it's still a fun conference. Plenty of offensive fireworks down in the Big 12. So I always am skeptical of the Big 12 athleticism, like TCU wide receivers, Oklahoma wide receivers, just the level of competition. But when I saw the combine numbers out of Ben Sanat, I was like, I'm all in. I think the only thing, I don't know if you mentioned it, he's good in the blocking. I mean, he's a kind of mean, nasty blocker. He can be a 3-down tight end for you right away. I have a second-round grade. I would not be surprised if he's off the board in the top 64 picks. Now, if he's there in the 3rd round, I think he goes really quick. I think he's your modern-day. If it wasn't for Brock Bowers, we'd be talking more about Senate or Sanat. I'm never sure which one it is. But, yeah, I think the Wildcat is a great tight end prospect.
Yes, very, very much. Love the analysis tonight, boys. There, love that. It was a great episode. Thank you all for who tuned in tonight. Love talking wide receivers and tight ends, especially as prospects. You can't get enough of that, obviously. Coach John, just back from my old days. John, you're an honorary coach tonight, absolutely. But John, we appreciate you jumping on as always. We love having you on every year. You bring great insight and great detailed on a lot of these prospects. If there's anything you want to say that you got going on, you want to talk about, I'll give you the floor now, my friend.
Yeah, if you want to check out I have a teammate. Let me start again. I have a teammate, Matt Hicks, on the Rookie Big Board channel. We have 28 player profiles up there right now that look at each player from an analytical and film analysis scouting report. Each one's about 12 to 15 minutes. Rookie Big Board on YouTube. Go check that out. It's all free. And we have 2 latest episodes, 9 sleepers for running backs and tight ends, and 9 sleepers for quarterbacks and wide receivers. Obviously, each player gets a smaller breakdown than we have on the big shows, but check those out. And all my written content. I used to be on Football Diehards, but unfortunately that is no longer around because one of my good friends, the publisher, has cancer. I'm wishing him the best in his recovery. But I'm now at playerprofiler.com. You can see all my written reports there. I think there's 41 profiles. I broke down the players, and the link to all my rankings are there too.
Yeah, so definitely go check that out. John's a great person to know and about prospects and all that stuff. I love checking out his work every year. It's really awesome. Fantastic work there, John. And Coach Tyler, anything you want to say before we get going?
Yeah, go check out Dynasty Nerds. We didn't have our little promo segment today. Use code COACH. Like we've been talking about, all 22 film room. They're loading a whole bunch of film on there. If you want to watch the guys that we're talking about, see if you see the same things, see if you see anything different, go jump on there. We got the Dynasty GM as you're valuing picks and players going into your rookie drafts, and you're trying to make trades and figure out what the best avenue to go down is, or just to see how much better than your teammates or your league mates you are. Go check out the Dynasty GM. Lots of written content over there under the Devi tag for draft content. Lots of content over there for Dynasty and redraft in general. So go to DynastyNerds.com, use code COACH, and go win some leagues.
Absolutely. I said if you're watching film when playing Dynasty, can definitely give you some kind of advantage over the next people in your league. And of course, I have my own rookie profiles over there at Dynasty Nerds I've been writing too. I didn't talk too much tonight, but I do have a lot of prospects out there that you should definitely also as well check out. And of course, guys, we will be back next Monday to finish our 2-part series between wide receivers and tight ends. We'll talk about some of the wide receivers you didn't hear tonight that you might have wanted to next week, next Monday at normal 6 p.m. time frame. So we thank you guys all for listening. Tune in until next time, everyone, and have a good one.
Back to back is not far-fetched. We got a couple of